All right, so at this point, we're getting pretty deep into our conversation. We're moving on to step number three, which is going to be more of the fun stuff. Okay, we're going to figure out what works for you individually because, again, each person is different and different things are going to work for different people. So we're going to start there. Okay, to start off our conversation, we're going to talk about calories because everybody requires a different number of calories per day. Calorie needs change with activity level and body size. And so I want you to just think for a second, how many calories do you think that you need to consume on a regular basis? Okay. So is it 1,000? Is it 1,200? Is it 2,000? Is it 2,400? Is it 3,000? Is it 4,000? Okay, how many calories do you think you need to consume on a day-to-day basis? Okay, I'm going to share with you general recommendations based on the dietary guidelines, and then we'll also talk about some variances depending on activity level. Okay, based on the dietary guidelines, okay, the average, okay, 19 to 20-year-old female should be consuming how many calories do you think? Okay, a sedentary 19 to 20-year-old female should consume on average 2,000 calories a day. Okay, 2,000, not 1,200, not 1,000, 2,000 calories a day. Okay, if you're a little bit more active, that number increases to 2,200. If you're even more active, that recommendation increases to 2,400. Okay, and again, this is going to change based on your height and your weight. But those are our general recommendations. Anywhere between 2,000 and 2,400 calories a day for the average woman, 19 to 20 years old. Okay, the older you get, that decreases a little bit. For say our 31 to 35-year-olds, sedentary recommendation is 1,800. Okay, our most active recommendation is 2,200 calories a day. Okay, so now I'm not saying that you need to necessarily go out and count your calories on a regular basis, but I do want to point out here um, that this recommendation is probably higher than most women would expect it to be. For some odd reason, the number 1,200 calories likes to float around in the nutrition atmosphere as like the gold number for weight loss. Okay. However, consuming 1,200 calories a day is just not going to be enough to keep your body operating optimally. Okay, you're gonna be hungry. You're not gonna be satiated. You're not gonna get to eat foods that you enjoy if you're only consuming 1,200 calories a day. And so really watch out, for people who advise that as a number. Okay, if you're a little bit smaller, then yes, maybe that's what's gonna work for you. But um, you're going to miss out on key nutrients and adequate calories if you're only consuming 1,000 to 1,200 calories a day. And long term, that can actually be really detrimental to your metabolism. If your body gets used to operating off of 1,000 calories every day, on the off occasions that you start to overconsume and increase your caloric intake, body's not going to know what to do with that additional energy, and you will be more prone to holding on to excess calories as fat. And so you're actually more likely to gain weight in the long run if you regularly consume much fewer calories. So if you're able to consume a moderate amount on a regular basis and maintain your weight, that is what's going to be ideal. Okay, for our men, a recommendation is going to be a little bit higher. It's about 2,400 calories for the sedentary 19 to 20-year-old male and up to 3,000 calories for the active 19 to 20-year-old male. Okay, and that's going to, again, be pretty similar for the next couple of years. And as you get older, the recommendation decreases. Now, once again, I'm not necessarily sitting here telling you that you need to count your calories either. Counting calories is a really meticulous process, and to be quite honest, most humans are pretty bad at it. There's so many variables that can throw off your count that it's really difficult to count calories accurately. So if we know our general caloric limit, what do we do instead if we're not going to count calories? And what I like to talk about here is quality and quantity of food. Okay, quality versus quantity. And in our discussion, both are going to be very, very important. Okay, quality and quantity are the two most important fundamentals of nutrition when it comes to caloric balance, really. So first, we're going to talk about quality. Okay, quality of your food is extremely important. Now, while it is possible to lose weight on a diet of Oreos and Twinkies, as long as you keep your calories down, it won't result in optimal health. And most people are aware of that, right? And as a side note, think of health as the motivator for making nutritional decisions, not necessarily weight. While most people want to lose weight, that goal can be attained in some very unhealthy ways. If you consume a good, healthy diet and your goal is not weight loss, sometimes that's a beneficial side effect. So make health your priority, and the weight will naturally follow the way it needs to. Okay, focusing on food quality will help your body to better function the way it's supposed to, and that'll just lead to a healthier, happier you. My basic rule of thumb for food quality is this: focus on choosing the most natural foods as possible. And now it's important to be aware this doesn't necessarily mean foods that say natural on the label or foods that say organic on the label. Okay, because actually that term natural is not a regulated term. Anybody can really put it on their product, and it makes people more likely to buy it because they're like, oh, this is healthy for me. It's natural, so I'm going to consume it. But just because a box says natural doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy. Okay. When I say choosing natural foods, I mean foods in their simplest form. Minimally processed foods. Single ingredient foods is another good way to think about it. Okay, so these are going to be foods like sweet potatoes or apples or rice or broccoli or beef or chicken. Okay, single ingredient foods. Foods that came out of the ground that way or off of an animal that way. These are the foods that your body was designed to eat. They have fiber, they have nutrients, they have vitamins, they have minerals. Okay, they take a lot of work to chew and digest. They fill you up, they keep you satiated. This is what the human body was designed to consume. Okay, whether you believe in evolution or creation, okay, creation by God, you can't argue with the fact that bodies and humans were designed to consume foods that grow out of the ground or come off of an animal, right? Um, when you focus on food quality, the food quantity naturally falls into place. And why? Why does this happen? When you give your body the nutrients it needs, it actually does a really good job of regulating hunger signals and cues and your appetite. Okay, when you eat vegetables and meat and all of those single ingredient, fiber rich, nutrient dense foods, your body will end up telling you when it's had enough. Okay, and it's actually quite challenging to overeat when you're constantly taking in the foods your body wants and needs, like vegetables and fruits and whole grains and, lean meats. Okay, if on the other hand you decide to eat a package of Oreos, um, you're not giving your body the nutrients it needs. You're taking in a lot of calories, and only it makes you hungrier and hungrier, right? Who's ever done that? You are hungry, you want to satiate that hunger, you're craving some Oreos, you eat six of them, and you're like, I need more food. That did absolutely nothing for me. Okay. This will happen really with any food that's extremely palatable, something that tastes really good, usually processed foods, and are low in nutrients. Okay, this is why when you start eating poorly, it's actually really, really hard to stop. So it's important to switch gears and try to think about giving your body what it wants. Okay, so we already talked about food quality and food quantity and what that is, but now I want to discuss what does that mean for your health. Um, because if either of these things are out of whack, especially the quantity, this can lead to some serious health detriments, especially weight gain. Okay. Um, Individuals with body fat levels in the extremes, either too low or too high, are likely to have serious health problems that reduce their life expectancy and also threaten their quality of life. Okay, especially those who are obese have a higher risk for developing cardiovascular disease, stroke, adverse lipid levels like high cholesterol, hypertension or high blood pressure, glucose intolerance or diabetes, insulin resistance, okay, um, obstructive pulmonary disease, gallbladder disease, arthritis, certain types of cancers. Okay. And obesity is independently associated with coronary heart disease, heart failure, cardiac arrhythmias, stroke, and even menstrual irregularities. Okay. Just being obese itself. Okay. So, what does this mean for us? It's really hard to pinpoint that one specific food is the culprit of any of those problems. Okay, it's not going to be enough to blame something just like saturated fat or just blame carbohydrates or just blame protein or whatever, for all of these health issues or sugar, right? People like to blame sugar for their health issues, but it's actually really, really difficult to pinpoint any one of these things as the culprit. And the reality is that not one of these things is the culprit for these health issues. Rather, we have very clear evidence that just overconsumption, which leads to obesity, is one of the main culprits in the chronic illness epidemic. Okay. So, this is essentially why that food quantity piece is so important. If you consume your calories in moderation, even if you're consuming things like pizza and cupcakes and I don't know, whatever bad foods you can think of, if you eat those in moderation or small amounts and you're still getting all the nutrients and the fiber that your body needs, okay, and you're in caloric balance, your health will be fine. Okay. Problems arise not from eating, quote, bad foods in particular, but from over consuming all foods in general. Processed foods, foods high in fat, foods high in sugar are more likely to be overconsumed. So, in general, those are the things we want to avoid, but it doesn't mean they have to be off limits altogether. All right. Does that make sense? Okay. So, keep that in mind. Okay, so since we've decided that there are foods that are obviously better to consume and others that are not, does that mean that some foods are good and some foods are bad? The short answer is no. Okay, food has no moral value. Um, and really, it all comes down to sustainability once again. Sustainability in a diet is important, especially when it comes to your mental health and motivation. Okay, when a food is termed off limits, what do you do on the inevitable occasion that you're presented with the opportunity to eat said food? Okay, well, it's 100% okay to say no to that food. Okay, what happens if you can't? You give in, and in your head, it's like, it's all over. Okay, you feel guilty, fear that that one bite of cake is going to ruin all of your progress. But the reality is it hasn't. Okay, one bite of cake, one whole slice of cake isn't going to ruin your progress. Cheating on your diet didn't ruin anything for you. Okay, you will be able to continue to make progress on your goals. But the fact that that food was termed off limits to you now instills this terrible sense of guilt inside of you. Your relationship with food is distorted, and you blow your mental health. The blow to your mental health is far worse than it was to your physical health, than if you just let yourself eat the cake and enjoy it. Okay, so my recommendation here is don't put anything off limits. There's no such thing as bad foods. Rather, there are foods that are full of nutrients and fiber that provide your body with what it needs. There are foods that are less nutritious. Okay, make the bulk of your diet foods that your body needs and enjoy everything else in moderation. Let that be your motivation for eating healthy. So then why do we label foods as bad? What makes a food bad? Take a second and think about all the foods that in your head are bad for you, are off limits that you shouldn't consume. What are those foods? And ask yourself some questions here. You can think about a specific food if you want. You can think about a whole group of foods. Why is a food bad? Ask yourself these things. Is it bad because it made you gain weight? Is it bad because it causes disease? Is it bad because it makes you feel icky and gross? Okay. Why do we label those foods as bad? Okay. The biggest link to chronic health conditions, as I have said earlier, is not sugar. It's not saturated fat. It's not carbohydrates or sodium. It's obesity. Okay. And so what causes obesity? Sugar doesn't cause obesity. Saturated fat doesn't cause obesity. Okay. Carbohydrates and sodium do not cause obesity. Overconsumption of these things, um, overconsumption of all foods in general, okay, that don't provide a lot of nutritional value is what leads to obesity. Okay. What foods are typically labeled as bad? Think about those for a second. It's the ones that are easy to overconsume. It's not because they have sugar in them. It's not because they have saturated fat. It's the foods that are easy to overconsume, like pizza and Oreos and Twinkies and cupcakes and cake, right? It's all the food that doesn't satisfy you, it doesn't fill you, and it's easy to eat a lot of. Okay, so with this in mind, approach your consumption of these foods with a different mindset because truly, okay, all foods will do your body some good. Okay, when you eat something, okay, your body doesn't look at anything that enters your digestive system as good or bad. It just sees all the essentially molecules and compounds that it gets broken down into. Okay, you don't eat a piece of pizza and your body goes, oh my God, you just ate a piece of pizza. Why did you do that? I'm going to make you gain 5 pounds. Okay. It doesn't work that way. Your body sees calories and it sees fat, maybe more than it needs. It sees maybe some sugar, it sees carbohydrates. Okay. And your body actually wants to work really hard for you and do the best that it can with that food. Okay. And some of that piece of pizza are going to put to good use in your body. Okay. The carbohydrates are going to be used for energy. The fat's going to be stored for future energy. Okay. Um, and, and your body wants to do the best it can with the foods that you consume. If you can think of your consumption of all foods in that way, okay, they go into your body, they're broken down and used appropriately. Okay, and your body wants to do the best it can with all the foods you consume. Okay, that also helps to further distance yourself from that good versus bad mindset. Because all foods that you consume to some extent will be used for good. And then, really, just anything extra your body didn't need is what gets stored as fat, and that's what you want to avoid. All right. Moving forward, I want to talk about a couple foods specifically that get a bad rap, types of foods that tend to be labeled as bad. And I want to talk about why. And I've mentioned a couple of these already. The first being sugar. Okay, sugar gets a terrible reputation, but once again, is sugar inherently bad for you? Um, the answer is no. Okay, sugar, especially table sugar, okay, is a molecule called sucrose. It's a disaccharide. And it's composed of two monosaccharides or two smaller molecules called glucose and fructose. Okay. Now, when your body consumes sugar or any other carbohydrate for that matter, it gets broken down into its smaller constituent parts, ultimately being glucose. Okay. No matter what carbohydrates you consume, they ultimately get broken down as broken down into glucose. That glucose then is used for energy in your body. It's either sent immediately through your bloodstream to be used as energy, blood sugar, blood glucose, or it's stored in your muscles and your liver for future energy. And this storage form is called glycogen. Okay. When you consume even a spoonful of table sugar, okay, once again, your body doesn't look at that going, oh my goodness, what are you doing? I'm going to make you hold on to that as fat. Your body sees, oh wow, a rapid source of energy. Okay. Do we need this right now? Do you need lots of immediate energy? Yes, maybe so. Maybe you're working out and you're an athlete or you're exercising, and that'll get put to good use immediately. Okay. If not, if you're more sedentary, your body will say, well, I don't really need that right now, but let's hold on to it for later. Maybe we'll need that later. And then it's hold on to it as fat. Okay. So that's why overconsumption of sugar can be bad, but again, not inherently detrimental. And this goes for all forms of sugar, like corn syrup, okay, high fructose corn syrup. Okay. Typically, sugars are rapidly digesting, and if your body needs that energy immediately, it's going to want it. However, if it doesn't need energy immediately, it's going to end up to storing it as fat. Okay. Ultimately, your body does need carbohydrates for energy. And once again, the issues with sugars is that they do tend to taste really good. And so sugar can be really easy to overconsume. And so that's our problem there again. It's the overconsumption, it's not the sugar itself. Sugar also can be relatively addictive in some people. Some people feel like they need the sugar to function and operate normally. And so those are the individuals that maybe would benefit from reducing their intake. Um, so their body doesn't necessarily rely on that sugar for immediate energy. Okay, but again, this isn't everybody. Second food that gets a bad rap is fat. Okay, fat's been the bad guy for a long time, but most research has told us now that fat is not what makes you fat. Okay, once again, overconsumption is what makes you fat. And so, no, fat is not inherently bad for you. There have been some correlations between saturated fat intake and the development of heart disease, but we still don't have firm answers in that sense. So we don't know for sure if saturated fat is the key problem when it comes to cardiovascular disease. Okay, fat is important for proper functioning in your body. It's important for things like hormonal regulation and nerve conduction. And so if you don't consume any fat, body's not going to run as ideally as it could. Okay, fat's also an excellent source of stored energy. Okay, when it's stored as adipose tissue or body fat, essentially that mechanism was designed in humans, okay, in situations where we had to fight through periods of famine. And so this excess stored body fat allowed us to survive, okay, when we couldn't access food regularly. But once again, like sugar, the problem with fat is it tastes really good. Okay, have you ever had no fat foods? They usually taste gross. And so the problem with fat is high fat foods taste delicious and therefore are really easy to overconsume. Okay, fat is also incredibly calorically dense. Okay, there are more calories per gram of fat than there are in sugar or protein or carbohydrates. Okay, and so you can get a lot of calories in your system that maybe are unneeded for a very small amount of fat. Okay, there's like 100 calories in a tablespoon of butter. So if your body doesn't need those calories, okay, it's going to be really easy to overconsume. High fat foods are also not very satiating. They don't fill you up. And so again, really easy to overconsume. Okay. What maybe gets the worst reputation is those foods that contain both fat and sugar. Okay, and the issue here is that this combination is very, very palatable. It tastes delicious, foods that are high in fat and sugar. But as you probably figured out by now, foods high in fat and sugar are also often low in essential nutrients and fiber. And so they just don't fill you. It's a dual threat, really, high palatability and low satiety. Tastes really good and it doesn't fill you up. So once again, it's very, very easy to consume. And so these foods are a major culprit for the obesity epidemic. Okay, because foods high in fat and sugar are also relatively cheap and easily accessible. Okay, very easy to overconsume, a major culprit for the obesity epidemic and therefore chronic health conditions. Okay, our last food with a bad reputation, or our last family of foods, are going to be processed foods. I've already mentioned several times that you want to avoid foods that are highly processed, but once again, are these foods inherently bad for you? And the answer is no. Everything you eat is really processed to some level. However, foods that are highly processed, really what happens is when you process a food or change it from its original state, you lose some of the nutrient content in every step along the way. Okay, so like an apple is going to have more nutrients and more fiber than applesauce, which is going to have more nutrients and fiber than apple juice, which is highly processed. Okay, so it doesn't mean apple juice is inherently bad for you. It just means, you're going to get more nutrients and more fiber, more satiety from a whole apple. The apple's going to fill you more. You're going to be better off. Okay. Doesn't mean apple juice is inherently bad for you. Um, and it's also important to remember to not fall victim to what's called the naturalistic fallacy. Okay, I mentioned this already, but natural is not even a regulated term. It's just a marketing tactic. Okay, and so many companies put this term natural on their products just as a marketing scheme to get you to buy them. It doesn't mean they're healthier. It doesn't necessarily mean they're more natural. Um, Okay, it's just a way to get you to buy their product. Same goes for organic, okay? Organic doesn't necessarily mean healthier. And in fact, if you don't have access to lots of money, okay, organic foods tend to be more expensive. Don't feel like you need to buy organic foods. I rarely buy organic foods, okay? Just focus on consuming apples and potatoes and, regular meats, and you're still going to be on a better path than consuming packaged, highly processed foods. Okay, but don't fall victim to that fallacy that just because a food has the term natural on it or a term is organic, that it's going to be better for you either. Okay, so once again, why should processed foods be avoided? um, they taste really good and they're easy to overconsume. One of the best pieces of nutrition advice I've ever heard is this. If there's a food that you lose complete self-control over, usually it's going to be some sort of processed food. That is the food that you want to avoid as much as possible, or just really work on your relationship with that food. If you're able to control that, your eating habits in general will improve dramatically. Okay, so watch out for those foods that you just lose all self-control over, and those may be the ones that are best to avoid. Moving on to a new topic, we're going to talk about diets, okay, and weight loss in general. And a big question I think about a lot, is why is today's world so obsessed with weight loss? You can Google search for nutrition advice and information to be healthy, and inevitably you'll come across articles that give weight loss advice. Um, Over time, this has really led our culture to closely associate health with weight loss, which I believe to be incredibly damaging. Okay, it seems that everyone is slowly learning that diets aren't the answer, which is great, but everyone is still really obsessed with weight loss, which I don't necessarily understand. Why do we think that we have to lose weight to be healthy? In fact, a lot of people that are seeking weight loss information don't have a need to lose weight at all. It's just what society is telling them. What if somebody who doesn't need to lose weight then comes across some of this weight loss information, and is led to believe that they need to lose weight to be healthy? And this whole cycle just really drives me insane. And what we need to do is learn how to be happier with our bodies, really. The reality is that if you're unhappy with your body, no amount of weight loss is going to fix that inside of you, okay? If you're able to take care of your body through balanced nutrition and exercise, and get adequate sleep and drink enough water, and learn tools to help yourself disconnect from the guilt or strong emotions attached to certain foods, then what you weigh will really seem very unimportant, when it comes to the quality of life that you're living. Okay. Weight itself really has no importance on your health and your well-being. Okay. Focus on, again, those big rocks. And the amount that you weigh, the number on the scale, will slowly start to seem much less important. And you'll focus on how you feel and how happy you are, which is, the big goal here.